Okay, so imagine this Gaza, but not as like we usually think of it like a war-torn place, but as like prime real estate.
Whoa.
That's kind of how former President Trump sees it.
Huh. Interesting.
It's February 2025.
Yeah.
Another war between Israel and Hamas has just ended, and Trump's like stepping in
Okay.
with a bold proposal.
Mhm.
Some might even say bizarre,
Oh, really?
a U.S.-led redevelopment of Gaza.
Interesting.
You've got the CNN article
Yeah.
detailing his vision
Okay.
and like the reactions that it sparked.
Gotcha.
So we're going to unpack this proposal,
Okay.
see who's saying what,
Uh-huh.
and try to figure out what this all means for the future of the region.
I think that's a good idea. And it's certainly a fascinating case study, you know?
Yeah.
We're not just looking at like a redevelopment plan here, right? We're
Right.
seeing how Trump's background in real estate and his very specific way of using language shapes his approach to this incredibly complex geopolitical issue.
That's a really good point. Like,
Yeah.
he literally describes Gaza as a big real estate site, ripe for development by the U.S.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the language you expect, in a post-conflict situation.
It's definitely unconventional.
Yeah.
And it really raises the question, is he like oversimplifying a deeply rooted conflict?
Right.
Or is there like a method to this seemingly outlandish approach?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Trump's known for his deal making,
Uh-huh.
his focus on like transactions and profits.
Right.
Could this be his way of applying that same mindset to international relations, viewing peace as like the ultimate deal?
Whoa, that's a really interesting take. It
Yeah.
makes you wonder if he sees this as a humanitarian crisis or more like a business opportunity.
Right. And that's what makes this deep dive so intriguing.
Yeah.
We're not just analyzing a news story, we're peeling back layers of language perception and potential motivations.
Totally. Okay, so let's get into the specifics of this proposal.
Okay.
Trump envisions the U.S. owning and developing Gaza gradually. He vaguely mentions other Middle Eastern countries housing displaced Palestinians.
Uh-huh.
But there are no specifics about which countries or how that would even work.
Yeah.
And he claims, of course, that this will bring stability to the Middle East.
Notice how these terms, ownership, development, stability, they're all loaded with meaning, but presented with almost no concrete details.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the lack of clarity itself is part of the strategy.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Mm.
So the bold vision,
Yeah.
maybe a little vague and definitely different from how we normally think about conflict resolution.
Yeah.
But what was the reaction like?
Yeah.
Did people buy into this real estate approach to peace?
Well, not exactly. The reactions were about as diverse as the stakeholders involved.
Okay.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu initially seemed to jump on board,
Well,
even calling Trump's vision revolutionary and creative.
sounds promising.
Yes, but then things took a turn.
Oh.
After huddling with his cabinet, Netanyahu kind of backpedaled, suggesting a different path forward. One more, focused on Israeli security and cooperation with the Palestinian Authority. Now you have to wonder what happened in those closed-door discussions.
Yes.
Was it internal pressure,
Right.
international blowback,
Yeah.
or maybe Netanyahu realized that Trump's plan wouldn't fly in the real world?
Yeah, it sounds like there's some political chess games being played here.
Absolutely. And then we have to consider the Palestinian perspective.
Right.
A Hamas official didn't mince words, calling Trump's remarks absurd and accusing him of treating Palestinian land as like a commodity. From their standpoint, this isn't peacemaking. It's just another chapter in a long history of dispossession.
Wow. Two very different interpretations of the same proposal. You have Netanyahu's initial enthusiasm,
Yeah.
followed by a cautious retreat, and then a complete rejection from Hamas.
Exactly. And that's why it's crucial to examine not just what's being said,
Right.
but who's saying it, why they might be saying it, and what their underlying interest might be.
Yeah.
It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, where each piece has its own hidden agenda.
So how do we even begin to make sense of this? Is this a genuine attempt at peacemaking?
Yeah.
A power play disguised as development, or something else entirely? And what does this whole real estate framing tell us about Trump's approach to conflict resolution?
That's what we're going to explore further as we delve deeper into this fascinating and, frankly, quite perplexing situation.
Stay with us as we unpack the ethical considerations of redevelopment in a conflict zone and explore the historical context that hangs over this entire proposal. It's about to get even more interesting. Welcome back. We've been talking about Trump's unconventional, to say the least, proposal for Gaza.
Right.
And it's already sparked some pretty strong reactions.
It has, and it raises some serious questions about the very nature of peace building. Is it about imposing solutions, or is it about fostering understanding? Can you really rebuild a place without addressing the deep-seated issues that caused the conflict in the first place?
That's what I keep coming back to. It feels like we're trying to solve a deeply rooted conflict with a Band-Aid of, I don't know, luxury condos and shopping malls.
It's an interesting analogy, and it highlights the potential dangers of approaching a humanitarian crisis with a purely economic lens.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a place where people have experienced trauma, displacement, loss.
Right.
To just focus on development and ownership without acknowledging that human cost feels, insensitive at best.
It's like saying, let's just pave over the past and pretend it never happened.
And that's where the historical context becomes so crucial.
Yeah.
This Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been going on for decades, with countless attempts at resolution.
Right.
The Oslo Accords, the Camp David Summit, numerous UN resolutions, all failing to achieve a lasting peace.
Yeah, right. For those who might not be familiar, the Oslo Accords were a series of agreements signed in the 1990s aimed at creating a framework for peace between Israel and Palestine.
Right.
And the Camp David Summit back in 2000 was another attempt to broker a final peace agreement, but it ultimately collapsed.
Exactly. These were major milestones, but they also demonstrate just how difficult and complex this conflict truly is.
Right.
And Trump's proposal, while presented as this new and innovative solution, seems to completely sidestep this complex history, almost as if he believes he can just swoop in and fix it with a real estate deal.
Yeah. It's like he's operating in a historical vacuum.
Precisely. And that historical amnesia is a dangerous thing.
Right.
It prevents us from learning from past mistakes and understanding the root causes of the conflict.
Right.
Without that understanding, any attempt at resolution is likely to be superficial and short-lived.
So let's say, hypothetically, we entertain this redevelopment idea for a moment.
All right.
Who actually benefits from this? And who might end up worse off?
That's where things get even more complicated. If the U.S. takes ownership of Gaza, as Trump suggests, what happens to Palestinian sovereignty? What about the right of return for refugees, a key issue for Palestinians? And who gets to decide what this development looks like?
Right.
Is it designed to meet the needs of the Palestinian people, or is it driven by external interests? Maybe even strategic considerations for the U.S.?
It almost sounds like this could further marginalize the very people it's supposed to help.
It's a valid concern. There's a long and often troubled history of development projects in conflict zones that have ended up exacerbating inequalities, displacing communities, and benefiting powerful outsiders more than the local population.
So it's not just about building new structures, it's about understanding the power dynamics, the historical context, and the potential for unintended consequences.
Absolutely, and that's what's so glaringly absent from Trump's proposal. Any real consideration of these complexities.
We've talked about the lack of details,
the
historical amnesia, the ethical concerns. Is there anything at all that we can view as a positive outcome of this whole situation?
Well, it's certainly sparked a conversation, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
It's forced us to confront some difficult questions about the nature of conflict resolution, the role of language, and the responsibilities of those in power.
So maybe the silver lining here is that it's gotten people talking and thinking critically about these issues.
Perhaps. And ultimately, that's what we need. More informed discussion, diverse perspectives, a willingness to learn from the past. Without those elements, finding a path towards a just and lasting peace remains a distant hope.
You've given us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I'd love to hear your perspective on one more thing.
Sure.
Trump's approach seems very transactional. Very focused on deals and immediate outcomes.
Right.
How does that contrast with what we know about the complexities of real peace building?
That's a crucial point. Real peace building isn't about imposing solutions from the outside.
Right.
It's about facilitating dialogue, understanding different narratives, and addressing the root causes of the conflict.
Right.
It's a messy, long-term process requiring patience, empathy, and a commitment to justice.
And that's a far cry from just dropping some new buildings on top of a conflict zone and calling it a day.
It certainly is. Real peace requires a much deeper and more nuanced approach.
Right.
one that acknowledges the complexities of history, the power dynamics at play, and the human cost of conflict.
This has been eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's clear there's so much more to understand about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the challenges of finding a lasting solution.
And that's the beauty of these deep dives.
Yeah.
They're not about providing all the answers,
Right.
but about sparking curiosity, encouraging you to think critically, and empowering you to explore these complex issues further.
All right, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to hear your final provocative thought for our listener. What's something that's been swirling in your mind as we've been unpacking all of this? We're back for the final part of our deep dive into Trump's Gaza redevelopment plan. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's one piece of this puzzle we haven't really examined yet. Trump's vision kind of hinges on other Middle Eastern countries taking in displaced Palestinians, but he's awfully vague on the details.
Yeah, that's a crucial point, and it reveals a lot about the underlying assumptions of this proposal. Like, there's no mention of which countries he has in mind, what they think about this idea, or how such a massive relocation would even work logistically or politically.
Yeah, it's like he's treating entire countries as pawns in his grand scheme, moving them around without considering their own interests or the potential for further instability in an already volatile region.
It does raise concerns about a sort of neo-colonial approach, where a powerful nation just dictates solutions without truly engaging with the complexities on the ground. And it brings us to a broader theme we need to address: the ethical considerations of using development as a tool, or perhaps even a weapon, in conflict zones.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for me.
So development, when done right, can be an incredible force for good.
Yeah.
It can improve lives, create opportunities, foster stability,
Right.
but it can also be used in ways that are less than altruistic. Think about it. If development projects are driven by external interests,
Yeah.
they can end up displacing communities, reinforcing existing power imbalances, and ultimately exacerbating the very problems they claim to solve.
So it's not inherently good or bad. It all comes down to the how and the why behind it.
Precisely. And that's what's so troubling about Trump's proposal.
Yeah.
There's no clear sense of how this redevelopment would be carried out,
Right.
who would benefit, or how it would contribute to lasting peace. It's all about what new buildings, U.S. ownership.
Yeah.
But the human element, the ethical considerations are entirely missing.
Which makes you wonder, is this truly about helping the Palestinian people, or is there a hidden agenda here?
Yeah.
Could this be about projecting U.S. influence in the region? Maybe securing access to resources or gaining a strategic advantage?
Those are questions we need to be asking. And unfortunately, without more transparency from the Trump camp, it's impossible to know for sure.
Yeah.
But here's what we can do as engaged citizens. We can't just accept these proposals at face value.
Right.
We need to scrutinize them, ask tough questions, consider the potential consequences, and demand accountability from our leaders.
All right, it's time for our final takeaway. What should our listener be thinking about as they go about their day having deep dived into this complex issue with us?
Well, Trump's Gaza plan might fade from the headlines, but the questions it raises have a timeless relevance.
Yeah.
So the next time you hear about any development project in a conflict zone, remember to dig deeper.
Yep.
Ask yourself, who's really driving this?
Right.
What are the potential costs and benefits for all parties involved? And most importantly, whose voices are being heard and whose are being silenced?
That's a powerful reminder. We can't just be passive consumers of information. We need to be critical thinkers, asking the right questions and demanding transparency. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking journey.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope our listeners continue to explore these crucial issues long after the episode ends.